The accusation that changed everything. The morning sun poured softly through the tall glass windows of the Grand Horizon Hotel, one of the most luxurious hotels in Mexico City, its golden rays reflecting on the marble floors like liquid fire. Guests in elegant suits and expensive perfumes filled the lobby, the air buzzing with the rhythm of early checkouts and business meetings. Among the quiet chaos moved Lucia Morales, a 32-year-old housekeeper dressed in a plain gray uniform, her dark hair tied neatly into a bun. She moved quickly but carefully, pushing her cleaning cart with both hands, her eyes focused, her heart calm. She had been working there for 6 years, never late, never absent, never careless. Her co-workers admired her quiet strength, though few knew the depth of struggle hidden behind her gentle smile. For Lucia, every day was a battle fought with grace, the battle to survive, to send money to her mother back in Oaxaca, and to keep her dignity intact in a world that often looked down on people like her. That Monday morning, the hotel was unusually crowded. A group of foreign investors had booked the conference hall, executives rushed through the corridors with phones pressed to their ears, and tourists filled the breakfast area. Lucia had just finished cleaning room 512 and was heading toward the lobby when the sound of sharp, angry shouting froze her mid-step. The voice came from the reception desk, high-pitched, furious, and unmistakably used to being obeyed. "That woman, she's the one who stole it," shouted a tall, blonde woman dressed in a flawless white designer suit. Her manicured finger pointed directly at Lucia, whose cleaning cart squeaked to a stop. For a moment, Lucia didn't move. Her mind refused to process what was happening. Then she realized everyone was looking at her. The chatter in the lobby faded into a suffocating silence, broken only by the sound of her own heartbeat. The hotel manager, Mr. Ortega, hurried forward, his face pale with embarrassment. "Madam, please calm down," he said, trying to manage the situation with an uneasy smile. "There must be some misunderstanding." But the woman only raised her voice louder, her words slicing through the air. "Misunderstanding? My diamond bracelet, worth $30,000, was on the dresser when I went to breakfast. When I returned, it was gone. She was cleaning my room. She's the only one who could have taken it." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some guests stepped closer. Others whispered to each other, their eyes fixed on Lucia as if she were already guilty. The manager turned toward her with forced politeness. "Lucia, could you please come with me to the office?" "Just to clear this up," he said, his tone more command than request. Lucia's hands trembled on the handle of her cart. "Sir, I didn't take anything," she said softly but firmly. "I never even saw a bracelet," the woman scoffed, her voice dripping with venom. "Of course you'd say that. People like you always pretend to be innocent until proven otherwise." That phrase, "people like you," hit Lucia harder than any accusation. She felt heat rise to her face, not from guilt, but from shame and anger she couldn't express. She wanted to defend herself, but her voice caught in her throat. The entire lobby was staring, strangers judging her without knowing her name, her life, or her honesty. It felt like standing naked before the world, every shred of dignity being stripped away. Before she could gather her courage to speak again, a calm male voice spoke from behind the crowd, deep, steady, and commanding enough to make everyone turn. "Excuse me," said the man, stepping forward slowly. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair brushed neatly back, a streak of silver near his temple that only added to his presence. His tailored navy suit was simple but unmistakably expensive, the kind that spoke of quiet power. His brown eyes, sharp yet kind, swept across the scene before settling on Lucia. "What's happening here?" he asked, his tone calm but carrying authority. The manager instantly straightened up. "Mr. Santiago! I didn't realize you were here," he stammered. The name seemed to ripple through the staff. Emiliano Santiago, the owner of Santiago Group, one of the largest real estate empires in the country, a man who rarely appeared in public without reason. The blonde woman blinked in surprise. "You know her?" she asked suspiciously. Emiliano looked at Lucia, and without hesitation said words that made the entire room fall into stunned silence. "Of course I do. he said with calm conviction. She's my wife. The word wife seemed to echo through the marble lobby like thunder. Lucia's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes widened as she looked at him, completely bewildered. She had never seen this man in her life. Yet he stood beside her with the confidence of someone protecting what was his. The blonde woman's face twisted in disbelief. Your wife? She repeated with a bitter laugh. That cleaning woman? Emiliano didn't blink. Yes, he said firmly, his voice low but powerful. And I suggest you watch your tone, because if you continue accusing my wife of theft without proof, I will make sure your next vacation destination is a courtroom. The crowd gasped. Mr. Ortega looked like he might faint. Mr. Santiago, please, there's no need to escalate. Oh, there is, Emiliano interrupted sharply. You allowed my wife to be humiliated in front of strangers. I will not tolerate that. Lucia stood frozen, her mind spinning. She wanted to say no, to tell everyone he was lying, but his eyes met hers, calm, reassuring, and filled with something unexpected. Kindness. Don't be afraid, he murmured, just loud enough for her to hear. I'll handle this. There was something in his voice, steady, protective, that made her heart slow down for the first time since the shouting began. The manager, flustered and sweating, turned to the blonde woman. Madam, perhaps we should check your room again. Maybe the bracelet fell somewhere. It didn't fall, she snapped. But Emiliano's steady gaze made her falter. You heard the man, he said. Go check again. And if you can't find it, my lawyers will be in touch. The woman hesitated, realizing she had just picked a fight with someone far beyond her reach. With a final glare, she turned toward the elevators, her heels clicking angrily against the floor. The manager followed, apologizing profusely. The crowd began to disperse, whispers filling the air. Emiliano turned to Lucia. Come, he said softly. Let's get some coffee. Still in shock, Lucia followed him toward the hotel cafe. She didn't understand any of this. Why had this man, a stranger, defended her? Why had he claimed she was his wife? And most of all, why did a small, quiet part of her heart feel safe beside him? They sat in a quiet corner, away from curious eyes. The waiter approached nervously, bringing 2 cups of coffee. Emiliano waited until the man left before speaking. You must be wondering why I did that, he said, his tone gentle. Lucia nodded, unable to find her voice. Because I've seen this before, he continued. When I was a boy, my mother worked as a maid. One day, a woman accused her of stealing a bracelet, just like today. She was innocent, but no one defended her. They humiliated her in front of everyone. She lost her job, her dignity, everything. She cried for days. Later, the bracelet was found under the guest's own bed, but by then it was too late. My mother never recovered from that shame. He took a sip of his coffee, his expression darkening. I swore that if I ever saw something like that happen again, I would not stay silent. Lucia listened, her chest tightening. His words hit something deep inside her. That pain of being invisible, of being looked down upon because of where you were born or how you dressed. I'm sorry about your mother, she said quietly. I've seen people treated like that too. It's horrible. Emiliano nodded. It's not just horrible, it's wrong. And if I have the power to stop it, even once, I will. His voice carried quiet conviction, the kind that didn't need to shout to be believed. Lucia finally dared to ask, but why say I'm your wife? A small smile touched his lips. Because people like her only respect power. If I had said you were just a staff member, she wouldn't have listened. But a millionaire's wife? That she fears. He leaned back in his chair, studying her expression. You didn't deserve that humiliation, and I wasn't going to let you face it alone. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound being the clinking of cups and the murmur of distant conversations. Lucia felt something unfamiliar, gratitude mixed with curiosity. She had met many rich men in her job, but none like him. Most looked through her as if she didn't exist. But this man saw her, really saw her. And that was something she had not felt in years. Before she could say anything else, Mr. Ortega appeared again, this time looking pale and nervous. Mr. Santiago, he said quickly, Madam's bracelet was found behind the dresser. It appears it fell during her stay. She deeply regrets the misunderstanding. Did she apologize to my wife? Emiliano asked coldly. She left the hotel already, Ortega stammered. Then you will write a formal apology to Lucia, Emiliano said. And every staff member who witnessed this will know she was innocent. Understood. The manager nodded rapidly. Yes, sir. Of course. When he left, Lucia turned to Emiliano, overwhelmed. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. Yes, I did, he replied softly. Sometimes the truth needs a voice that others will listen to. That night, as Lucia returned home to her small apartment in Iztapalapa, the city lights flickering through the bus windows, she couldn't stop replaying the events in her mind. She looked at the business card he had given her before leaving. Emiliano Santiago, CEO, Santiago Group. His name looked so out of place in her hands. She placed the card in her old wallet and smiled faintly. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. She didn't know if she'd ever see him again. But something inside her whispered that fate wasn't finished with them yet. And as she closed her eyes that night, unaware that her life had already begun to change forever, the same question echoed in her heart. Why did he choose me? The unexpected. Call 3 weeks had passed since that unforgettable morning at the Grand Horizon Hotel. Yet Lucia Morales still heard the echo of Emiliano Santiago's voice whenever she closed her eyes. His words had been few, but they carried a weight that had settled deep inside her heart. She had returned to her routine as if nothing had happened, waking before dawn, taking the crowded bus to the hotel, scrubbing floors until her arms ached, then returning home to a tiny one-room apartment where the walls seemed to breathe with silence. But something had shifted in her since that day. She moved with a new awareness, as if for the first time she understood that there were still people in this world capable of seeing goodness without status attached to it. And that realization was both comforting and dangerous because it made her start to dream again. She had placed Emiliano's business card inside the small wooden box that held her mother's photograph and a pair of worn earrings. Every evening before sleeping, she would open the box, glance at the card, and then close it again as if sealing away temptation. She told herself it was just gratitude, not interest. He was a man of wealth and influence. She was a woman with calloused hands and an overdue electric bill. Their worlds were separated by walls money and class had built long ago. But life has a way of dismantling walls when the heart needs a lesson in faith. It was a Thursday afternoon when Lucia's old phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost ignored it, thinking it was a wrong call or another message from the loan office. But something made her answer. "Hello?" she said cautiously. A familiar voice came through the static, deep and measured. "Lucia, it's Emiliano Santiago." For a moment she couldn't speak. Her hand tightened around the phone as if holding a memory. "Mr. Santiago, how did you get my number?" He chuckled softly, a sound that carried both warmth and hesitation. I asked the hotel manager. "I hope you don't mind. If you'd rather I not call again, I'll understand." "No, it's okay," she replied, her voice smaller than she intended. "I was just surprised." There was a pause, and then he spoke again carefully, as if choosing each word. "I wanted to ask you for a favor. My company is hosting a business dinner tomorrow night for some foreign investors. Usually I bring someone to these events, a colleague or a partner. But this time I'd like to invite you." Lucia nearly dropped the phone. "Me?" she whispered. "Yes, you. I know it's sudden, but I need someone genuine there. These gatherings are filled with people who smile with their mouths and scheme with their eyes. When I met you, I saw someone real. And after what happened at the hotel, I thought perhaps it would be nice to make my lie a little less of a lie. At least for one evening." Lucia was speechless. She had never been invited anywhere by a man like him. Her mind raced through all the practical reasons to refuse. "I don't have the right clothes. I don't know how to talk to rich people, and I certainly don't belong in that kind of place," she said honestly. "I'll help you with everything," Emiliano answered. "I'll send you a dress and shoes. You don't have to pretend to be anyone else. Just be yourself. That's exactly what I want." Lucia hesitated. The idea felt like a dream, or a mistake waiting to happen. But his tone carried no hidden motive. It was simply sincere. "Would you pay me for my time?" she asked quietly, thinking of the night shift she would miss. "Of course. 5,000 pesos. And transportation will be covered. Her breath caught. 5,000 pesos was almost a month's salary. After a long moment of silence, she nodded even though he couldn't see it. Okay, she said softly. I'll go. The next evening, a black car pulled up outside Lucia's apartment building. Children stopped their games on the street to stare at the luxury vehicle and whisper. The driver, a polite man in a dark suit, handed Lucia a large white box and a sealed note. Inside the box was a navy blue evening dress made of soft silk, matching heels, and a small silver clutch. The note read, "Wear this. I'll pick you up at 7. Don't worry about anything." Lucia touched the fabric with awe. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever owned. Her neighbor Rosa helped her with her hair and makeup, laughing and crying at the same time. "You look like a movie star," Rosa said, sniffling. Lucia smiled in the mirror, but inside she felt terrified. It had been years since anyone called her beautiful. When Emiliano arrived, he stood at the door for a moment just looking at her. The streetlights reflected in his eyes, and his usual businesslike expression softened into something gentler. "You're beautiful," he said quietly, and Lucia blushed, unable to meet his gaze. "Shall we?" He offered his arm, and for the first time in her life, she felt what it was like to be treated with gentle respect instead of polite pity. The restaurant was a world she had only seen in magazines. Crystal lights hanging like stars, tables draped in white linen, waiters moving with silent precision. Lucia's heart pounded as they entered, but Emiliano's hand on her back steadied her. He introduced her simply as Lucia, never mentioning her job or their strange first meeting. He treated her as an equal, which confused and touched her at once. During dinner, he listened more than he spoke, and when others tried to boast about profits and contracts, he shifted the conversation toward kindness, education, and hard work. Lucia watched him in admiration. This was not the arrogant millionaire she had expected. This was a man who still carried the memory of humble beginnings in his eyes. As the evening unfolded, she felt herself relax for the first time. A gentle music played from the corner of the hall, and the air smelled of vanilla and expensive wine. When one of the investors asked who she was, Emiliano simply smiled and said, "She's the reason I remember why I work." The table laughed, thinking it was a charming remark, but Lucia felt tears sting her eyes. No one had ever spoken about her like that, as if she mattered, as if her existence could inspire someone else. When the dinner ended and the car pulled up to her building, Lucia didn't want the night to end. She sat silently for a moment, the sound of rain tapping on the roof. "Thank you," she said finally. "It was wonderful." Emiliano turned toward her. "It was wonderful because you were there," he said simply. She laughed softly to hide the flutter in her chest. Before she could reach for the door handle, he spoke again, his voice lower. "Lucia, may I tell you something strange? When I saw you that day at the hotel, you reminded me of my mother. Not because you look like her, but because you have the same dignity. She believed that good people deserved to be seen, and you made me believe that again." He paused, then added softly, "I forgot what it felt like to have someone real around me." Lucia didn't know how to answer. All she could say was, "I'm just a housekeeper, Mr. Santiago." He shook his head. "No, Lucia. You're proof that honor has nothing to do with money." Their eyes met for a moment that seemed to stretch into forever. Then she stepped out into the soft rain and watched his car disappear into the night. Back in her small apartment, she placed the dress carefully in her closet and sat on her bed with her heart still racing. She knew nothing about what this meant or what would come next, but she felt that her life had quietly shifted its course. Somewhere deep inside, she heard his voice again. "Say I'm your wife," he had said that day, a lie that had protected her truth. Now she wondered if fate was turning that lie into something more real than either of them expected. And as the rain continued to fall against the window, Lucia closed her eyes and whispered to herself, not in fear, but in a new kind of hope. Maybe this is where my story really begins. The gift of possibility. The days after the dinner passed with a strange stillness in Lucia's life. like the calm that follows a summer storm when the world seems to hold its breath before the next wave of change. She returned to her cleaning routine at the Grand Horizon Hotel, yet everything felt different now. The walls she had walked past for years no longer looked the same, and neither did she. The gossip had spread among the staff like wildfire. Some said she was secretly married to a millionaire, others whispered she had a powerful lover, and a few even suggested she had blackmailed him for money. Lucia ignored them all. She had learned long ago that truth does not need to defend itself against rumors. What mattered to her was the quiet memory of the way Emiliano had treated her. Not as a servant, not as a stranger, but as someone who deserved respect. Every night she came home, she found herself thinking of him, of his calm eyes and the gentle conviction in his voice. It wasn't love, at least not the kind she understood. It was something deeper, a kind of trust she hadn't felt in years. For a woman like Lucia, whose world had always been about survival, the idea that someone like him could see her as worthy of kindness felt almost like a miracle. And yet she feared it too, because miracles had a way of vanishing without warning. One afternoon, as she was finishing her shift, the hotel manager, Mr. Ortega, approached her with an awkward smile. "Lucia, there's a gentleman waiting for you in the cafe," he said, his tone unusually polite. She felt her stomach tighten. There was only one person who could make the manager speak like that. When she entered the cafe, her heart confirmed what her mind already knew. Emiliano was there, seated at a corner table, dressed simply this time, in a light shirt with his sleeves rolled up. He looked up from his laptop and smiled as if seeing an old friend. "I hope I'm not interrupting your day," he said warmly. Lucia shook her head, trying to hide her surprise. "No, sir. But I didn't expect to see you here." He gestured for her to sit. "Please, it's Emiliano." "No more, sir. I came because I wanted to talk to you about something important." As she sat down, he closed his laptop and leaned forward. "Lucia, I've been thinking a lot about that night we met, about how easily someone's life can be judged by a uniform or an accent. You reminded me that not everyone gets the same chances, even when they work twice as hard. I want to change that, at least for a few people if I can, and I'd like you to help me." She frowned slightly, unsure of what he meant. "Help you how?" He smiled, seeing the confusion in her eyes. "I'm starting a new foundation, the Santiago Initiative. It's meant to help women from working-class backgrounds learn business skills, management, and financial literacy. I want you to be the first participant, maybe even a coordinator later. You have something that can't be taught. Perseverance." Lucia stared at him, speechless. For a moment, she thought he was joking. "Me? I don't know anything about business. I clean rooms. I don't run companies." Emiliano shook his head patiently. "You know more than you think. You've been managing your own survival for years, haven't you? That takes intelligence, discipline, and courage. The rest can be learned." His words filled the air with a quiet power that made her chest ache. "Why me?" she finally whispered. "Because you remind me of where I came from," he said simply. "And because my mother once told me that when you have more than you need, you must build longer tables, not taller fences." Tears blurred Lucia's vision, but she blinked them away. "I don't want pity," she said softly. "This isn't pity," he replied gently. "It's an opportunity. What you do with it is up to you." There was something in his tone, firm but full of belief, that made her want to believe in herself too. She agreed to join the foundation, though fear whispered in her heart that she would fail. But Emiliano had a way of silencing that fear with his calm certainty. Over the next few weeks, Lucia began attending workshops held in one of the office buildings his company owned. She learned about budgeting, communication, and small business planning. At first, she sat quietly in the back, afraid to speak, but gradually she began to share her ideas. She discovered she had a gift for organization and for motivating others. Her natural empathy made people listen to her, and soon even the trainers noticed her potential. Emiliano visited the sessions often, always quietly, never making her feel pressured. Sometimes he would bring coffee for everyone and sit through the lessons, watching with a proud smile as Lucia began to shine. One afternoon, after the class ended, he called her into his office. The view from the window overlooked the entire city, towers of glass and steel stretching toward the clouds. "Lucia," he said, turning from the window, "how would you feel about managing the foundation branch for this district? You've shown leadership, and I think you can handle it." She froze, certain she had misheard him. "Manage? Me?" He nodded. "Yes, you. You'll have a team to help you. You'll earn a proper salary, and more importantly, you'll be helping other women build better lives." Her mind flooded with memories, scrubbing floors until her hands cracked, counting coins to buy medicine for her mother, being accused of theft. And now, standing in this office with a man who believed in her, it all felt like a story from another world. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. "Say yes," he replied with a gentle smile. "Say you're ready to become who you were meant to be." And she did. Over the following months, Lucia grew into her new role with quiet confidence. She helped dozens of women learn to manage savings, open small shops, and apply for microloans. The transformation was not only in her life, but in her spirit. She began dressing differently, speaking with calm authority, yet she never lost the humility that defined her. Every time Emiliano saw her leading a meeting or encouraging another woman, he felt an unfamiliar warmth, a sense of pride mixed with affection he hadn't felt in years. He told himself it was admiration, nothing more, but deep down, he knew it was something far more dangerous. One evening, after a long day of training sessions, Lucia walked out of the building to find Emiliano waiting by his car. The sky was painted in shades of violet and gold as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. "You didn't have to wait for me," she said, smiling. "I wanted to," he replied simply. They stood in silence for a while, the air filled with the faint hum of traffic. Then he said, "Lucia, do you ever think about that day at the hotel?" She laughed softly. "Every day. It changed everything for me." He nodded slowly. "It changed something for me, too. I didn't realize how empty success can feel until I met someone who reminded me of its purpose." Lucia looked at him, her heart heavy with emotions she couldn't name. "You gave me my dignity back," she said quietly. "No," he said, stepping closer. "You always had it. I just made sure the world saw it." Their eyes met, and in that moment, words became unnecessary. The city lights flickered below them like scattered stars, and for the first time, Lucia realized that the walls separating their worlds were beginning to fade. She didn't know where this path would lead, but she no longer feared the unknown, because this time, she wasn't walking alone. As she returned home that night, a soft rain began to fall again, just like the night of the dinner. She looked up at the sky, the cool drops mingling with the warmth of her tears. Tears not of sadness, but of gratitude. Life had not given her everything she wanted, but it had given her something far more precious, a chance to become more than what the world expected her to be. And somewhere across the city, sitting alone in his apartment filled with silent luxury, Emiliano looked out at the same rain and whispered to himself, almost unconsciously, "Maybe I didn't lie after all. Maybe calling her my wife wasn't such a lie to begin with." Shadows of envy. The transformation of Lucia Morales was becoming the quiet talk of the city's working districts. From a hotel housekeeper who once scrubbed marble floors until her hands bled, she had become the local coordinator of the Santiago Initiative, leading workshops, organizing training sessions, and inspiring other women to believe in themselves again. The small foundation that Emiliano had envisioned was now growing faster than anyone expected. Each week, new faces arrived. Women who had once been trapped in poverty or fear, now daring to dream because they saw someone who looked like them standing at the front of the room with confidence. Lucia was no longer just a helper. She had become a symbol of hope, but not everyone celebrated her rise. In the shadows of admiration, jealousy began to stir, silent but dangerous. Some of her former co-workers from the hotel whispered that she must have seduced the millionaire, that no man of wealth would help a poor woman without reason. Even a few participants in the foundation began to question her. "She acts like she's better than us now," one woman muttered during a class break. Lucia pretended not to hear, but the words cut deep. She had spent her life proving her worth through honesty and hard work, and yet envy found a way to poison even kindness. Emiliano noticed the change in her eyes before she ever spoke about it. One afternoon, he stopped by the foundation office with coffee, as he often did, and found her sitting alone at a desk, staring at a stack of reports without turning the pages. "Something's bothering you," he said softly, setting the cups down. She sighed and tried to smile, but her eyes betrayed exhaustion. "It's nothing," she said. "I'm just tired." "Lucia," he said gently, "I know when you're hiding something." She looked up, her voice trembling. "People are talking, Emiliano. They say I'm only here because of you. They think I don't deserve this." He frowned, his jaw tightening. "Let them talk. Their opinions don't define your value." "But it hurts," she whispered. "It hurts because I've worked so hard to be seen for who I am, not who I'm standing next to." Emiliano sat across from her, his eyes full of quiet intensity. "Lucia, people will always create stories about what they can't understand. You're doing something most of them never had the courage to try, changing your life. That kind of strength scares small minds. You can't let them take that away from you." She wanted to believe him, and part of her did. But the loneliness of success was heavier than she expected. At the hotel, she had been invisible, but invisibility was safer than being the target of gossip. Now every move she made was noticed, discussed, and twisted. A few days later, the foundation hosted its first public charity gala, a formal evening event where donors, press, and guests would gather to raise funds for the next branch opening. Emiliano insisted Lucia should be the one to give the opening speech. She refused at first, terrified of speaking in front of so many important people, but he convinced her with his quiet confidence. "You don't need to impress anyone," he said. "Just speak your truth. That's what people connect with." When the night of the event arrived, the ballroom glowed under chandeliers, filled with soft music and murmuring voices. Lucia wore a modest cream-colored gown, her hair simply tied back. Emiliano stood beside her as she stepped onto the stage, and for a moment, seeing his reassuring nod gave her courage. She began to speak, her voice unsteady at first, but growing stronger with every word. She told her story, not as a tale of pity, but as a lesson of faith. She spoke about the dignity of work, about believing in yourself even when no one else does, and about how kindness from one person can light 1,000 lives. The audience was silent, captivated by her sincerity. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Tears shone in the eyes of several women in the crowd. Even some of the hard-faced businessmen wiped their eyes discreetly. Emiliano stood in the back, clapping quietly, pride radiating from his expression. After the event, donors lined up to congratulate Lucia, and journalists asked for interviews. The foundation's name spread across social media the next morning. But success like light casts long shadows. Among the guests that night had been a woman named Clara Mendoza, a public relations executive who had worked closely with Emiliano's company for years. She was beautiful, sharp-tongued, and used to being noticed. She had admired Emiliano for a long time, perhaps even loved him in her own cold way, but he had never shown interest. Seeing him now, standing close to Lucia, smiling at her with quiet admiration, stirred a storm of envy in Clara's heart. A week later, rumors began to circulate online. Anonymous comments suggesting that Lucia's relationship with Emiliano was inappropriate, that the foundation was a cover for his personal affairs. The posts spread quickly, feeding on curiosity and malice. Lucia found out when one of the women at the office showed her a gossip article with her photo and the headline, "From Housekeeper to Millionaire's Muse, the Woman Behind Santiago's Heart." Her hands shook as she read the lies. The article hinted that she had used sympathy to climb into power, that she had manipulated Emiliano's emotions for her benefit. She felt her world collapsing again. The same humiliation she had once felt in the hotel lobby returning with cruel familiarity. That night, she went to Emiliano's office, her eyes red from tears. "You have to end this," she said firmly. "Shut down the foundation, fire me, whatever it takes. I can't let your reputation be destroyed because of me. Emiliano looked up from his desk, his face unreadable. No, he said simply. I won't. Emiliano, they're saying terrible things about you, she cried. And worse about me. I can't stand being called those names. He stood and walked toward her slowly. Lucia, listen to me. You did nothing wrong. I won't punish truth because of lies. But the board, the press, she began, but he interrupted gently. Let them talk. I've dealt with worse storms. I'm not going to sacrifice something good because people are afraid of it. His calm only made her cry harder. You don't understand, she whispered. I spent my whole life being invisible because it was safer. Now I wish I could disappear again. Emiliano's expression softened. He reached out and gently took her hands, his voice lowering. Lucia, you're not meant to disappear. You are meant to shine, even if the light blinds others. Don't let them make you small again. The warmth of his touch and the sincerity in his words steadied her, though her heart raced in confusion. She wanted to pull away, yet she couldn't. For the first time, she realized the depth of what she felt for him, something she had tried to deny but could no longer ignore. Days passed, and the noise began to fade. The foundation released an official statement, and Emiliano's legal team handled the press. But between him and Lucia, something had changed. An invisible thread had tightened, fragile but undeniable. They saw each other more often now, working late to repair the damage, sharing quiet dinners afterward. Their conversations grew deeper, their silences more comfortable. Emiliano spoke about his loneliness after his mother's death, about how wealth had surrounded him with people but never with warmth. Lucia listened, her heart aching for him. She shared her dreams, of opening a small school someday, of helping children who, like her younger self, grew up thinking they were meant to stay poor. One night, after a long meeting, they stood together on the office balcony overlooking the city. The wind carried the scent of rain. Emiliano turned to her and said softly, You know, the night I called you my wife, I didn't think it would matter. It was just a way to stop someone's cruelty, but now I think it changed my life more than yours. Lucia's breath caught, her heart trembling. Emiliano, she began, but he smiled faintly and looked away toward the glittering lights. Don't say anything. I just wanted you to know. In that quiet moment, words failed her, but her eyes spoke for her. The distance between them was filled with all the things neither dared to confess. Gratitude, admiration, and a love that had grown not from attraction, but from shared battles and mutual respect. As the night deepened, Lucia realized that the pain, the gossip, and the struggles were not punishments but tests. Tests of how much strength it took to hold on to dignity when the world tried to steal it away. She had lost her fear of being seen, and Emiliano, in defending her, had rediscovered the man he once hoped to be. But fate, as always, was not done with them yet. For as their hearts found quiet harmony, the world outside was preparing to challenge everything they had built. And this time, the storm would strike from where neither of them expected. The truth beneath the promise. The months that followed were both beautiful and difficult for Lucia Morales and Emiliano Santiago. Together they watched the Santiago initiative blossom into a national movement. What had started as a small local program became a beacon of opportunity across Mexico. Women from small villages and big cities joined, learning how to manage money, start businesses, and rebuild their dignity. Newspapers now wrote stories about Lucia, calling her the voice of the forgotten. The same people who had once mocked her now praised her. But while the world saw success, few saw the quiet storms brewing beneath her calm smile. Lucia had changed, but success came with a price. She had started working 12-hour days, giving speeches, attending meetings, traveling between cities. Every morning began before sunrise. Every night ended with exhaustion. The foundation's growth had attracted politicians, investors, and socialites, people who smiled for cameras but carried invisible knives. They all wanted a piece of her story. Emiliano warned her gently. The more light you bring, the more shadows will try to reach you. But Lucia, driven by gratitude and purpose, kept pushing forward, believing that doing good would be enough to silence evil. One day, while returning from a conference in Guadalajara, Lucia found herself face to face with betrayal. She was checking her phone in the car when she saw the headline, "Anonymous Source Claims Misuse of Funds in Santiago Initiative." The article accused her and Emiliano of embezzling donations, suggesting the charity was a front for personal gain. Her heart dropped. The story spread quickly. Television anchors, gossip sites, even news outlets picked it up. Photos of her standing beside Emiliano were displayed as evidence of collusion. Her name was dragged through the mud once again. She rushed to the foundation office, trembling. Emiliano was already there, surrounded by lawyers and board members, his expression unreadable. "It's false," he said calmly, "but we have to prove it." "Who did this?" she demanded, her voice cracking. He didn't answer, but in his eyes she saw pain and fury. Within days, an internal investigation began. Accounts were checked, documents reviewed, every transaction traced. But the damage was done. Sponsors pulled out, events were canceled, and the same people who once cheered for Lucia now avoided her. Reporters waited outside her apartment, shouting questions. She barely slept, barely ate, her spirit shrinking under the weight of accusations she didn't deserve. Finally, one evening, after another day of chaos, she confronted Emiliano in his office. "Tell me the truth," she said, her voice low but sharp. "Did someone in your company leak those numbers? Someone close to you?" Emiliano looked at her silently, then exhaled. "Yes," he said quietly. "It was Clara Mendoza." Lucia felt as if someone had punched her in the chest. "Why?" she whispered. "Because she wanted to hurt me," he said bitterly. "She wanted to destroy what we built because I rejected her advances long ago. She thought ruining you would ruin me." Lucia's eyes filled with tears. "Then why aren't you fighting her? Why aren't you defending yourself publicly?" Emiliano looked away, his voice breaking for the first time. "Because if I fight back, it will only drag you through more pain. The media will tear you apart. I can take it, Lucia, but you've already suffered enough because of me." She stared at him, realization dawning. "You're protecting me again," she said softly. "Just like at the hotel." He looked up and there was that same expression she had seen on the first day. Fierce, protective, selfless. "You didn't deserve this," he said. "I caused this chaos by saying you were my wife that day. Maybe if I hadn't interfered, your life would have stayed simple." "No," she interrupted firmly, her tears finally falling. "Don't say that. You changed my life for the better. You gave me courage. You made me believe I mattered." The silence that followed was thick with emotion. Then Emiliano stepped closer, his eyes filled with exhaustion and truth. "Lucia, there's something I never told you. The reason I said those words, 'She's my wife,' that day at the hotel wasn't just to protect you. It was because at that moment I saw my mother in you. The same humility, the same quiet pride, the same fear of being humiliated by people who thought they were better. When I lost her, I swore I'd never stand by and watch another woman go through that pain. So when I saw you being accused, my heart reacted before my mind did. I said the first thing that would make the world stop hurting you." Lucia covered her mouth, her chest shaking. "Emiliano," she whispered, but he continued, his voice soft and raw. "But later, as I got to know you, those words started meaning something else. Something I never expected. Because somewhere between trying to protect your dignity, I lost my own heart to you." Her breath hitched, the room spinning. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lucia took a slow step forward until she was standing right in front of him. "You can't say things like that," she murmured, her voice trembling. "Not when the world already misunderstands us." "Let them misunderstand," he said gently. "The truth doesn't need permission to exist." Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were not of pain. They were of understanding, of connection. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Say what you always do when you don't know what to say. Tell the truth." She nodded slowly, took a deep breath, and said the words that would stay with him forever. "The truth is, I don't know when it happened, but you became my home. Not because of what you gave me, but because you made me believe that kindness still exists in this world." He reached out then, his hand brushing her cheek with a tenderness that carried the weight of years of silence and struggle. But before the moment could deepen, his assistant burst into the room. "Sir, the board has called an emergency meeting. They're deciding whether to remove you as chairman." Emiliano straightened immediately, the businessman reawakening. "Tell them I'll be there." He looked back at Lucia, his voice steady again. "Whatever happens, I'll make sure your name stays clean." She shook her head fiercely. "No, Emiliano. We face this together. If I've learned anything from you, it's that truth needs to be defended, not hidden." The meeting lasted hours. Lucia stood beside him, facing the board members, investors, and lawyers who questioned every decision, every peso spent. She answered every accusation with calm strength, providing documents, explaining budgets, telling the stories of women whose lives had been changed by the foundation. Her voice did not waver once. Emiliano watched her in silent awe. This was no longer the frightened woman from the hotel lobby. This was a leader, a warrior born from hardship and faith. When she finished, there was silence in the room. The board members exchanged glances, then one of them finally spoke. "There is no evidence of wrongdoing. The initiative stays open." Relief flooded the room, and for the first time in weeks, Lucia smiled. After the meeting, as the building emptied, Emiliano walked her to the parking lot. The city lights shimmered like 1,000 stars, and the night air carried a quiet peace. "You were incredible in there," he said softly. "You saved everything." She shook her head. "No, Emiliano. You saved me a long time ago. I just returned the favor." They both laughed softly, a sound full of exhaustion and warmth. He looked at her then, with eyes that held both love and surrender. "Lucia, I told you once that calling you my wife was a lie, but I don't think it was. Maybe it was the truest lie I've ever told." She smiled faintly, tears glistening in her eyes. "Then maybe one day," she said quietly, "we should make that lie real." The night fell silent around them. Emiliano took her hand, and for the first time since the day they met, there were no misunderstandings, no fear, no walls between their worlds. Only two souls who had found each other in the chaos of life. Months later, when the Santiago Initiative was featured on national television as one of the most impactful social programs in the country, the anchor introduced its founder and director as Mr. and Mrs. Santiago. The audience applauded as the couple stood side by side on stage. Their fingers intertwined. Lucia looked out at the sea of faces, women, children, strangers, and remembered the girl who had once been accused of theft and humiliation. That girl was gone, but she carried her within her heart like a reminder of how far she had come. Emiliano leaned closer and whispered, "Now they all know the truth." Lucia smiled, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. "Yes," she said softly, "and this time, it's not a lie." And in that moment, the story that began with a single act of courage and with a stranger's voice saying, "She's my wife," became not just a story of redemption, but a testament to how compassion can rewrite destiny, how love born from kindness can conquer every falsehood, and how sometimes the most powerful truths begin as a lie told from the heart.